Friend of interest gives me mixed signals throughout an international trip, then tries to seduce a rich friend and his uncle in front of me. Is now apologizing, saying she can't remember what happened. I have two major questions, and this is a super weird situation that requires a bit of context, so please bear with me. A group of friends and I recently traveled for a few weeks throughout Southeast Asia, and I invited an online friend of mine for the trip. She mentioned she'd been trying to go to this region for a while. The few weeks before the trip, we had been texting every day, and during the first half of the trip, we got even closer while flirting and texting incessantly when not next to each other. After a late night walk after my other friends went to bed, we said our good nights, and I mentioned I'd love to spend more time with her alone, to which she replied, "Invite me on a date, smiley face." A few days later, our travel schedule lightened up and I asked via text if she was an active or casual date kind of a person. After leaving me on read for several hours, she messages back essentially saying, "Hey, I feel bad for doing this since I was the one who asked for a date, but I'd like to just stay friends," to which I reply, "No worries at all. Happy to stay friends," and that I was still glad she came on the trip. I realized it couldn't have been easy for her to say this, especially since I was the one link between her and the rest of the group while she was far from home, and I wanted her to know that she was still welcome. Plus, I've always been an enthusiastic yes, or it's a no person when it comes to dating. After we had established this, I feel like we both relaxed significantly once we cleared any tension, expectations. The next day, she invites me to a mixology place near her hotel after the group went to sleep early and we end up bar hopping a few times. In the morning, we go to the beach before the rest of the group joins us, getting manicures, first for me, why not right, and chatting. Fast forward 2 days, she takes an overnight bus to the next destination while my group catches an early morning flight on 3 hours of sleep. Since this was one of the last nights in the country before heading back, I wanted to do some more exploring while my group naps and gets massages, and she joins me. We spend the day exploring the city, riding the train, shopping at stalls, and taking me on a Ferris wheel for the first time. I felt the banter and chemistry was off the charts, and she kept glacking at my lips during our conversations, which left me pretty confused after our friends' chat, especially as I still had unresolved feelings. We meet up with the group for dinner with a rich friend of ours, 26 meters, that lives in the city. It's worth mentioning that this guy is rich, like heir to a household brand fortune rich, and also is romantically interested in another friend in the group, and vice versa. After dinner, he brings us to a friend's bar opening party where we start the night off with some dancing and drinks. Next, table at a club, he is also friends with the owner, behind the DJ booth. She takes a long pour from a bottle at the table and a little while later starts getting handsy with rich friend and looking for ways to get him alone with her. He brushes her off several times, and she gets handsy with me as well. After the club saga, she tries to get me to go home with the last member of the group, who was romantic with rich friend, and going back to his place for the after party alone. Rich friend tries to get me to take her back to her hostel at this point. He told me later he was a little tired of fending her off, but I misunderstood and said that I was good to keep going. When we get to his estate, she floats around and cuddles up with rich friend and his 2 mates who came with us back to his place. Then she decides to focus on rich friend and starts rubbing his arms, chest, and trying to kiss him in front of both me and the last group member. She then suggests we go swimming while making eyes at rich friend, which rich friend takes as a cue to disappear to the pool with the last group member. Shortly after they leave, rich friend's 84-year-old grand uncle shows up to the building we were in to say hi. It's 4 a.m. at this point. After she hears that this was rich friend's uncle, she starts rubbing his inner thigh and hanging off of him. Rich friend's 2 mates and I are chatting outside as uncle tries to shake her off while she follows him around, talking about his will. By now, the vibes were very off, and the uncle asked me in another language that uncle, 2 mates, and I share to please escort the gold-digging witch off of his property. She tries everything to stay, including saying she needs to make sure uncle gets back to his hotel. 2 mates tell her pretty harshly to knock it off and that uncle doesn't need to go anywhere since he owns the place, and she tries to shush them, which they take poorly. Rich friend gets back in his swimsuit with last group member at this point and pretty quickly picks up what has gone on. 2 mates also fill him in their native language. We leave after I apologize profusely, but rich friend says no hard feelings, gifting me a nice bottle of liquor to take back to my home country. After sleeping for an hour or so, group and I catch the first flight on our trip home. After the first leg of the journey, she messaged me on WhatsApp saying, "Yo, You alive? As if nothing happened. I opened the message, but didn't know what to say, so I just passed out on the next flight after filling in the group on what happened. When we land, new message, how's the travel going? I ignore this one since the hurt was still pretty fresh and I didn't want to say anything I'd regret. A few hours later, we missed the connecting flight and had to stay overnight in the airport. She noticed we all blocked her and sent an apology message on another platform basically saying she doesn't remember what happened, but since we all blocked her it must have been pretty awful and that she'd like the opportunity to take responsibility and apologize. If you're still with me, congrats. I have 2 questions. First, was she just leading me on for fun after the friend conversation, and if so, why? She said a couple things that made me think she just enjoys having power over men. An ex drove 8 hours every weekend to see me. Or bragging about another ex wanting to get back together. So maybe that is just it. Plus, she mentioned she takes meds for depression, and I think she may suffer from some good old low self-esteem. She also picked up on the fact that I make a decent living for myself and mentioned wanting to visit my city. Not sure if she came back to dig my gold after striking out with rich friend and uncle, who are several orders of magnitude above me in terms of wealth. Second, is it possible that she really just had too much alcohol and doesn't remember what happened? I've always kept a very close eye on how much I drink, but I've heard various accounts about how people do out-of-character things when blacked out. I personally thought that alcohol couldn't change morals or core beliefs, but I could be wrong. She was super wasted, though, very glazed eyes, and trying to scan into her hostel with her wallet, then a local money note. Depending on the consensus on behavior while drunk, I'm not sure if her apology is worth talking about or even responding to. And lastly, I'd really appreciate some blunt advice. This whole thing still has my brain and heart reeling. Dumb, I know, and the constant sleep deprivation hasn't really helped my decision making. My husband, 47M, and I, 32F, have been together for a little over 4 years and married for 2 months. We met at work when he just finished a short-term relationship and I was going through divorce proceedings from my previous husband. My current husband has 4 children from his previous marriage that ended 17 years ago. All children are now grown up. They were teenagers when we met and they were living with their mums sometimes and dad other times, depending how they felt at any given time. When we met I claimed I did not want to have children. This was coming from a childhood trauma of being abandoned by my parents at age of 7. I must say that I was quite unhealthy at the time. We moved in together pretty quickly and his children decided to move in one by one with us. It was definitely a shock to the system for me to step up and in a way take care of 4 hormonal teenagers. Possibly because of small age difference we got on great. Their mother is an extremely toxic individual leeching of anyone she can. At the same time I went to therapy to resolve my childhood trauma as I hated the way it impacted me in my daily life. A lot of work was put into it and I started to become healthier. Seeing as this pretended family life was bringing me joy, I said to my then partner that I do want to have a child. I realized that I only have myself in this life and it would be great to share something that's made of us. The relationship was amazing. Given the age difference, we understood each other on the same level. He is a very mature person and also has been through a lot in his life. At first my husband strongly disagreed with having any more children. You see, he always ever wanted to, but his ex-wife tricked him into 2 pregnancies to stop him from leaving as she knew he would do anything for his children. He endured abuse for more or less 11 years before realizing that kids will be happier if they split up. I understood his decision of not wanting any more children, but the need and instinct started growing in me and I realized that more than anything else I want my own family. Long story short, we didn't want to lose each other and went to counseling to see if there's anything we can do about this. After months of visits, my husband admitted that it actually would be amazing to have a second chance and give at least 1 child a happy home. I expressed to the therapist that I am afraid of my husband resenting me further down the road. I was assured by both husband and therapist that this is not how it works with children. You love them regardless. I wasn't sure at the start giving my own history but agreed that not all parents are like mine. My husband proposed to me in June 2022 and I agreed to marry him. My husband had vasectomy after divorce to not to be tricked by any other woman ever again in his life. We spoke that the route for us to start trying was IVF. We went through consultations, paid ridiculous amounts of money and then put a hold on everything as we were starting to see cracks on the surface. We were under pressure with work as we both hold high-end positions, His daughter fell into depression and we agreed this wasn't the time for it. Fast forward few months later. We are more in tune with work. Daughter is in therapy, living with us. Oldest siblings moved out and living with their significant others and we're planning on a wedding. Small, elegant ceremony only with his parents and kids. I didn't have anyone from my family I wanted to invite. The wedding was beautiful, exactly how we wanted it. This was September 2023. We went for our honeymoon, came back and life felt amazing. We decided to circle back to IVF, went through appointments, done what needed to be done, and time came for an embryo transfer. I asked my husband beforehand to please be there for me in the 2 weeks wait before the transfer and pregnancy test, as I will need his support, love and comfort in this time. He agreed with this and said that of course he'll be there. I was fortunate enough that hormones did not affect me in way they do some women. It was smooth sailing. The embryo transfer was done, to which I drove myself and drove home after. He had a meeting at work he couldn't reschedule, which I understood. In the first few days I noticed my husband distancing himself from me, going to pubs straight from work and coming back obliterated. In this time we also found out one of his sons is expecting a child with his girlfriend and they are 4 weeks along. I was very happy for them and my husband advised abortion. His son was not offended but declined and said that they are excited for it. In the next few days I noticed more decline in my husband, so I organized a trip down to see his parents and kids. This was last night. I can't drink for obvious reasons, but I enjoyed my evening watching everyone getting drunk and having fun as a family. When we got back to his parents' house I told my husband we need to be leaving around 10 a.m. next morning to collect my dogs from a friend of mine that we left for the night. What followed next shook me to the core. Dear husband, the love of my life blew up at me with the power of a nuclear bomb in a split second. Said that he is sick of me getting my way and forcing him to do things he doesn't want. I started crying as I didn't understand what was happening and told him to leave the room and that we'll talk in the morning. The same minute I started getting strong cramps in my stomach and was terrified I am miscarrying, even though I wasn't sure yet if I was pregnant. I didn't want his parents to see me like this, so I called him and asked him if he could bring me painkillers. He came into the bedroom to the hot mess I was at the time, sat down and amongst everything else said that he resents me for wanting a child with him. To be honest, I was half expecting it in the past week following the embryo transfer and wasn't that surprised. By God was I hurt. I told him that I don't see a way out of this and that I need time to see if I want to stay or leave, because how the fuck do you work past this? He said he didn't want to split and he just needed to get this off his chest. I ended the conversation. Haven't slept a wink last night. I am about to wake him up to go and collect the dogs and I haven't a clue what to do. Any advice or thoughts are appreciated.